You are listening to Kaio Conversations, a podcast about anything and everything that matters to Chi Omegas.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm Leslie Harrington, CEO for Chi Omega, and we are so fortunate that we are joined today by Carrie Lee, an initiate of the Kappa Lambda chapter at the University of California, San Diego. Carrie was an inaugural member of Chi Omega's Special Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and has long worked to support women and underserved communities. Carrie is an attorney and founding member of Pine Street Alternative Asset Management, an investment management firm with a particular emphasis on women and minority-owned managers. Carrie also led the Women's Minority Initiative at White & Case, one of the biggest global law firms, and she has supported next-generation leaders across the globe. She's an extraordinary example of living with high purpose and helpfulness, and we're thrilled that she is here to chat with us today. Welcome, sister.
Thank you for having me, Leslie. It's great to be a part of this podcast.
Well, Carrie, it's always so inspiring for me to see how our sisters use their talents and gifts for good. And you just happened to start your own investment firm specializing in the seeding of hedge funds. But what's particularly unique is that your firm places special emphasis on women and minority-owned hedge funds. So how do you identify, tell us how you do that, find the fund managers that are doing that great work?
Well, I think it'll come as no surprise to anyone that women tend to be extraordinary money managers, especially in the hedge fund world. They outperform significantly. And what we saw in the pandemic was that women were navigating the crazy markets and the down cycles better than men. And if you're not doing it because it's the right thing to do and the moral thing to do it for the love of money.
For the love of money. You said it. Yes, ma'am.
And it's not so difficult to find talented women when you have an incredible network of friends who other talented women will always put you in touch with other talented women, and it just snowballs from there.
Just like in Chi Omega. Now, aside from hedge funds, you are also passionate about a number of humanitarian projects as well. And you've actually spearheaded efforts in South America and Europe, in Africa and Asia, and the Himalayas, specifically disaster relief in Nepal. What do you think is more important, funding through philanthropy or volunteering your time?
I think absolutely both. So inequality is everyone's problem, and it's going to take a whole of society approach to fix. So I think philanthropies absolutely have a role to play. Government has a role to play. And certainly, like back to having an incredible network of talented women, there's so much, if you can't give financially, please give your time. Often when people volunteer, their talent is worth more than what money can buy.
I believe that. I believe that to be true. I bet there were a number of moments from these efforts that left a lasting impact on you. Can you tell us about one or two of them?
Yes, actually, during the pandemic, there was a moment that really broke my heart. We were serving the people in India and Nepal, and we had this one young volunteer, recent college graduate. She caught COVID. She lived in Delhi. So in India, they were running out of hospital beds, and they certainly prioritized men over women in the region. She was a working professional, came from a Indian middle-class family, and we had a hard time finding oxygen because she couldn't breathe. We finally found oxygen, but her family didn't want to spend the money to pay for medical care because they didn't think that they wanted to save their money for their son and not their daughter. But because she had saved up some money from being a working professional, she said she would buy the oxygen herself. But in places, in more conservative pockets, women don't have control of their own finances. So her parents wouldn't let her buy her own oxygen. The nonprofit that I ran offered to pay for it and provide oxygen for free, but they didn't want foreign interference. And as we were battling it out, she passed away. And She was a recent college graduate, very promising. And after crying for several days, we decided to do something about it. So we opened up free oxygen camps throughout the region, ensuring that everyone had access to it, whether they could afford it or not. I think it's absolutely ridiculous in this day and age that we even have to pay for oxygen. And then what it taught me was women really need to A, have a livelihood, and B, be able to control their own money as not just a matter of economic equity, but also just as a basic human right to be able to live and thrive.
My goodness, and survive.
Survive.
We really take a lot for granted in this country, and we are so fortunate. And I am so glad that you are giving of your time and talent to help these women worldwide. That makes so much sense. Any other stories that you have from your time volunteering?
Also, just joy. It's a similar type of joy that I found in college with my sisters in Chi Omega. But, I spent some time in the Himalayas, and I went through some of the more underprivileged, underserved communities. They had very little resources, but there was still a happiness and dignity that they were able to find. And it really sort of put me to shame. Here I am. My bread isn't, my sourdough isn't sourdoughy enough. But just the incredible power of finding joy in all circumstances was this beautiful lesson that I found. And there's this old Himalayan saying that says, if you can't find joy in what you're doing, it's so much harder to be successful. And so I encourage everyone in their career endeavors or whatever endeavors to find purpose and joy, and it makes everything just a little bit easier.
To find the joy and rethink what you really mean when you say I'm having a bad day. Is it really bad, or is it just not your favorite day? We got to put things in perspective, I think. Well, talking about perspective, let's go back to the beginning of your Chi Omega journey. Can you remember your initial days with the fraternity and what drew you to join?
Yes. Just such an incredible bunch of women that I have stayed friends with throughout the years. I turned 45 tomorrow, and I am still in touch. Thank you. And I am still in touch with the group of women that I met when I was 17 years old. Chi Omega was great. Surprisingly, the two best lessons I learned from Chi Omega were one, I think I was a little bit of a pain in the butt as a young teenager. So humility from the older sisters, I learned very quickly. And two, that you don't have to go about your college experience or any experience alone. What a wonderful gift to have a network of loving, supportive girlfriends.
You can face almost anything.
You can face almost anything, and it makes it a little bit easier to find joy. Leslie, I'm sure you and other women experience this, but we're taught to network. They tell you in your career, network. And I'm sure there are several women listening out there where the idea of going to a network event is painful. But I often think about I often try to reframe how I think about networking. And I go back to, who are the women that I enjoy spending time with? Who can I have dinner with? Who can I have wine with? And that is my form of networking, and let my network of supportive women grow organically that way.
Yes. And it's even easier to do the networking when you have someone to go with you. You don't always have to go it alone when it comes to networking. Take someone with you and you can network together.
Yes. And I've been at a cocktail party where I've given the sign of distress, hoping for a Chi Omega in the room. And another Chi Omega sister did come to my rescue.
We should really do that more often. It comes in so handy. So handy. Now, did you learn or experience anything as a collegiate member of Chi Omega that you still rely on today in your work or even in your personal life?
Yes, there's a quote from the symphony that I often think about, and it is now that I'm on the spot, I'm probably going to misquote it, but to choose to make the best choice that occasion and conscience demands.
Yes.
I think about that often because in the investment world, in my career path, is so in my personal life, there is no perfect decision. And like many women, I think that we're often paralyzed when we can't find the perfect decision to make. And so I think about that quote of, I'm just going to make the best decision with whatever information I have at the time and whatever the occasion and conscious demands of me in that moment, knowing that it's the best that I can do with what I have.
Yes, that statement hits different when you've had a number of those decisions under your belt. You're like, yeah, I get it. It is what occasion and conscience demanded. It wasn't necessarily my favorite choice, but it was
Right.
the one that the situation warranted. So true. You and I recently worked together on Chi Omega's DEI committee. What inspired you to say yes to that opportunity, and what about the work was most impactful for you?
You know, I, like many women, when I first graduated, I kept in touch with Chi Omega. I volunteered. And then I reached a certain point in my life where I sort of, life got busy and I wasn't as connected as I wanted to be with the sorority. And I think it was in 2020 or 2021. It was after George Floyd passed away. I received this email from national headquarters, and it was incredibly touching. And it was an email acknowledging that there were inequities in the world and apologizing for the sisters if they had experienced it at Chi Omega in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so powerful to me because nobody at that time, it was the first time I heard Chi Omega call out something like that and acknowledged it. And it was so meaningful to me that I called up and I wanted to support an organization that was brave enough to make a statement like that.
Yes. And I remember you and I were both on the same work group too, talking about financial barriers and access to membership. And we had a lot of great ideas, and they are still percolating and still being developed. Thank you so much for sharing your talents with us on that committee. It's great work. You were also named Most Influential Female Seed Investor of 2021 by Acquisition International, and you currently work for a leading think tank called the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center. Have you always been interested in the advancement of others? Has that been a long-time passion for you?
No, I started off my career incredibly selfish and narcissistic, to be perfectly frank. But then I found myself hitting so many barriers in my career, both on a daily basis. Don't ever ask me to take notes in a meeting. I will snap. Don't ask me to get coffee. I will also snap. And also when I was trying to make partner at a big major law firm, the every step of the way from the daily to the big structural stuff was soul crushing. And there were nights where I would hide under my desk crying because I didn't know how to overcome these barriers. And sometimes it's very hard to find your own voice in that moment and fight for yourself. But what I found really helpful was I never hesitated to speak up for another woman. I never hesitated to fight for my friends, right? When I saw them go through just microaggressions or be put in a very unfair situation, I found it easier to speak up in those circumstances. So for my path, the way that I heal and the way that I advance is by uplifting others, because sometimes it's just a little easier to help someone else than to help yourself.
Well, I bet that none of those women are taking the notes or getting the coffee either, and it's all because of you, right?
I hope.
I hope so. It sounds like, Carrie, you have really found your purpose in life and that you are finding joy almost every day. What advice would you give Chi Omegas in college today who are trying to find their sense of purpose?
Oh, that's a great question. Be patient with yourself. You may find that your purpose changes at different phases in your life. There are times where, that's a tough one, but I would say be patient with yourself. your purpose may evolve over time. Think of it as fine tuning, and it will fine tune and evolve over time, evolve over your lived experience. So definitely incorporate your lived experience into how you shape your purpose. And just once again, I'm just going to go back to find joy. If it's not an academic exercise, if you sit down and you map it out and you have a pros and cons, you are not going to find it. But like, follow what makes your heart sing, follow what makes you happy, follow the things that like make you happy, even if it's incredibly minor. That is usually the universe's hint and like little like breadcrumbs that they lead you to find your purpose.
Well, I know that we can all be our own worst critics on many days. And I think what you're saying is to give yourself some grace, and that you are never going to be perfect, but you're a work in progress.
Absolutely. And I will probably put money on our male counterparts are not worrying about perfection the same way we are.
No. I think that it is probably very common for women to put far more pressure on themselves and try to overcompensate in some ways. And it sounds like we can all do a better job of doing that less and really communicating our value.
Yes. And I also recommend, let's throw the word perfect out the window.
Easy for me to do. I am rarely perfect. I happen to know a very fun fact about Carrie Lee, and that is that you are an avid Formula One fan, which I would have never guessed about you. So I want to know all about this.
I love Formula One. I love cars, have always loved cars. And during the pandemic, I decided I wanted to be a race car driver.
Really? An actual race car driver? How do you do that? You just go sign up at the library or what?
Actually, pretty close. You can go to many forums. There are so many classes. You can take your ordinary car. They will block off a parking lot and teach you racing lines, and you can do autocross. But what I love about Formula One is one particular driver. His name is Lewis Hamilton. He drives for Mercedes-Benz. He is the greatest of all times. He's won 8 world championships, but he's the only and the first Black racer on the grid. And his story about overcoming obstacles and, because Formula One has traditionally been a very affluent sport, but, with hard work, dedication, he's just been able to crush the competition, but also he's uplifted others along the way. He has a nonprofit to make sure that women and people of color, young children of color are in STEM, are in engineering, that racing opportunities are available to them. And so that's an incredible inspiration to me.
Well, it sounds like he learned a lot from his racing journey, and now he is paying it forward.
Yes, because at the end of the day, it's nice to have trophies, but it's even better to have impact.
Well said. Now, what other fun facts do Chi Omegas listening today need to know about Carrie Lee? Tell us.
Fun fact, and I haven't shared this with you since we last spoke, but I recently became a presidential appointee. So I've joined the U.S. government to ensure that entrepreneurship opportunities are available to women and people of color.
That is amazing. The actual president of the United States, that presidential appointment?
That one, yes.
That's the one. Awesome. And tell me more about that position if you can, unless it's classified or top secret.
Well, I'll share with you the stuff that isn't. Okay. I am hyper-focused on closing the entrepreneurship gap. So women have a harder time getting funded. They have a harder time starting. They start with less net worth, so they often rely on heavy debt to launch a company. Business networks are often formed with people who've already done business together, so it's harder for women to break in. And then also there's a capacity gap. So where I am very focused on closing those gaps to make sure women have the funds that they need to launch and scale businesses, that they have appropriate networks of support along their entrepreneurship journey, and making sure they have the know-how. What we saw during the pandemic was that women were particularly vulnerable. And so what we also don't know is that women are leading the economic recovery. And for far too long, women have had to do more with less. So let's make sure women have the resources they need to uplift this economy and their families and communities.
Yes. Carrie Lee, you never cease to amaze me. I mean, since our last conversation, you have become an appointment by the president, and I got a haircut. I mean, that's about all that I have done since our last conversation. I could not be more proud of you.
Thank you, Leslie. Leslie, thank you so much for your leadership. I'm incredibly proud of what Chi Omega has become under your leadership, and you make me proud to be a part of this sisterhood.
Well, we all are an excellent group, a vast network of remarkable, powerful women, and we are two of them, of many. And I have loved sharing time with you today. Your work really speaks for itself, and it reminds us all to lift each other up when we continue and as we continue to reach our goals. And we're just so grateful for how you continue to do just that, and how you continue to support the fraternity, serve the fraternity, and to serve the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very flattered.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening today, and stay tuned for more Chi Conversations coming your way. Also, please email us at chiomega@chiomega.com if you have any podcast ideas or podcast guests you'd like to hear from in our next broadcast. And go check out all of our past Chi Conversations on our website. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.